Excellent. Thank you so much. That was, I don't know whether it's top score. I'll have to go back over some of the previous videos, but 322 is a pretty good time to beat. So I think Matt Lee still has the worst score, or worst I use in quotes. But God bless that man. I love how much he talks. Yeah, so actually a couple of things I want to touch on. The foster care stuff. I know it's not really industry specific, but it's super fascinating. Someone with kids themselves. How did you kind of get into that? Was there just like, was it
Yeah,
random
my
or
wife and
yeah?
I, always, you marry somebody who you're in line with, and my wife and I have been best friends for a long time, and during that courtship, we kind of talk about like, I'd love to adopt someday, and you just don't think about it again. You get
Yeah.
married, and you're going about life. We had a great 5 years, and we started try. Hey, it might be time. Our family
Mm-hmm.
members are having kids. We'd like the cousins to be the same age, and we tried and we tried and we tried, and it's the best part of having kids is trying to have them, and so we couldn't, and so we went into a fertility specialist and found out that between the two of us we both had enough issues that was like, well, you could probably fix these things, you could do all these treatments, and my wife and I just looked at it and go, nah, it's not for us, and
Yeah.
we jumped right into adoption.
That's
There was no
amazing.
question in our minds that this is
Yeah.
where we were supposed to be going. Our faith was going that direction and everything. And so we started looking at different kinds of adoption, foreign adoption, local adoption, babies.
Yeah.
And, my wife eventually just kind of stumbled across foster care and in FAPA. And we just got into the foster care program doing respite, which is where you do
Mm-hmm.
foster care on the weekends.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
give respite to other foster care workers, and you get these great kids,
Oh,
for like a
sure. Yeah.
weekend, and you build up. It's just babysitting essentially is what it is, but
Yeah.
you are doing a little bit more. And
Mm-hmm.
you notice that these kids, like, you would think that they would want mom. No, these kids, without fail, the
Yeah.
entire time we were foster parents, they wanted dad. They wanted daddy's lap to sit on,
Yep.
and that just, as a dad, that just melts you. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll just keep you forever. But these
Yeah.
aren't your kids, right? These are foster kids. Their families going through a hard time, and you're trying to help them through it.
Yeah.
But it kind of gave us a big heart for it, and eventually we met a lady who was fostering three kids at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and we met them and just knew they were
Yeah.
our kids, because they were up for adoption and in 6 months, and we said, okay, well, we'll let them have the holiday with their foster mom who they've been with for 3 years,
Yep. Yep.
and she became Grandma Donna. And while we're doing that, like, so we identified them in July of 2011,
Mm-hmm.
and in August of 2011 I get a phone call, and I'm working at a data center, I'm freezing my butt off sitting in front of servers,
Yeah. Super
and
loud. Trying
like,
to. Yeah.
hey, yeah, hey Adam, it's my turn. Do you want a baby? And I'm like, what do you want, Nicole? She's like, no, seriously, do you want a baby? I'm like, when? Like, I'm thinking teen pregnancy,
Yeah.
6 months out. What are the conditions here? And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, tomorrow. It was born
Whoa.
today.
Holy.
Little boy. I'm like, I should probably ask my wife.
Yeah. It's not like you bought a PlayStation or something and be like, hey, babe, guess what? Yeah. No, it's.
So I
Yeah.
called my wife and I'm like, hey, you want to have a baby? So I'm one of the few men out
Yeah.
there who have broken to their wives that they
Yeah.
could have a baby.
Yeah.
And
So unique. Yeah.
we had a conversation with our pastor. We talked amongst ourselves, and we said sure.
Yeah.
And we had 4 hours to decide that whole thing.
Yeah.
Life
Yeah.
changed. So the next morning, like, we were not expecting a baby. We were expecting three older kids,
Yeah.
like 5, 5, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had no baby stuff. And luckily, anybody who's reached the late stage of life where all their friends have had kids,
Yeah.
they'll just dump it on you. Here,
Garbage bags.
please,
Garbage bags
just
of it.
garbage
Yeah.
bags of baby stuff.
We're in the
And
process
so
of doing that ourselves. Yeah.
we were covered,
Yeah.
and finding cribs online,
Yeah. Yeah.
just trying to get there. So imagine going from no kids to an infant in less
Yeah.
than 18 hours,
Yeah.
and then
That's
going to 4 kids 4 months later.
yeah. But that's,
Woo.
like you either way, like you knew you had that in you. You had the idea. Sometimes it gets delivered in unexpected ways, but you
Yep.
still end up at the destination. That's incredibly fascinating because I've always spoken to people. I've got 2 kids myself, and everyone's like, "Oh, would you do it again? Would you recommend it?" It's like I can't say I recommend it to people because it's not a recommendation thing. Like
Yeah.
you know or you don't usually.
Yeah.
So Yeah, no, that's super awesome. Honestly,
You're
I'll just.
never prepared.
Oh
But
no.
either you know or you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I've always been like, look, I won't give you advice. If you would have questions, ask. But the one thing I was always saying is like anyone who is willingly giving you advice on how to raise your kids, probably something you don't want to listen to. Just you got to stumble in on your own. You can ask,
Yeah.
you can sound, but you've got to make the decision yourself. And then the second thing I told a good friend of mine was like, look, if you're worried about whether you're raising the kid correctly and it's keeping you up at night and things like that, that tells me you're doing a good job. Like as a baseline indicator, because it means you care. And half the time that's all it is, right? Just like worrying, caring, growing with the kids, and like you got to learn, right? Humility. Yeah, exactly.
You are not a perfect parent.
No one
And
is.
you make sure your kids know that too, right? Like,
Oh,
look,
yeah.
I know I make mistakes all the time. I'm
Yeah.
trying to be a better parent every day. Don't come in there thinking you're like pretend like you're perfect.
Yeah. You know, be willing to apologize to your kids
I
when you
tell
do
people
something
that's
wrong.
the number one
Yeah.
thing that us as a Gen Xer have
Yeah.
a hard time doing: apologizing to your kid.
Yeah,
You know, it's hard.
it is.
And but it also teaches them to apologize.
Yeah.
They're going to mimic you no matter what happens.
Yeah.
For
It's-
better or for worse, they're going to mimic you. You're going to
It's-
see
it's
your
tough, yeah.
worst attributes reflected right back in your face, and it's going to sting.
Or when one of them, they pick up your mannerisms so quick. Like,
Where did they get that from? Oh,
I can tell exactly. Like sometimes they're so accurate. I just look at my wife. I'm like, that one's you. She's like, yeah. Like we just know. They're just little things. So it's always it's a mirror. Yeah, to your point, it's like a mirror. Wonderful. Well, I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit. A little bit about your kind of journey into the industry, because you and I had a chance to talk a little bit prior to this about, you know, how you got your start and, you know, being more enterprise focused initially, and then you kind of dove into the human aspect. So like, how did you like end up in the channel essentially? Like what was your jump into this ocean that we exist in now?
still don't even know what the channel actually is, but I hear
Yeah.
people talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
No, I graduated in 2002 with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. I've been already working with schools, doing Cat5 runs, converting coax, helping with computers throughout the universities. And, you know, I knew I wanted to be an engineer, a computer engineer of some kind. I've known that since 1999, or sorry, 1988. I probably say.
Gotcha.
I've known
Yeah.
that was my career path.
Yeah.
And if you check my LinkedIn account, I have my first hard drive
There you go.
that I bought in 1997, mixed with, or 98, mixed with my latest hard drive.
I saw that the NVMe post. Yeah. I think I commented on it's like I had no idea how to install this when it first showed up.
so
Yeah.
I'm like looking at this, I'm like, what is this crap? This isn't a hard drive, you know.
Oh, I love
But
it.
I got into the field because I loved hardware, I loved computers, I loved the future of what they were represented. And so we were that first real generation that came out. Like I was educated in a computer sciences, and I wanted to go into IT,
Yeah.
which wasn't really a field at the time. And I had the option of either going into a then MSP, like a break fix shop where we were fixing PCs,
Yeah.
or I could have gone and worked for the State Patrol as an IT analyst technician for computers. My mom said, go with the velvet lined rut. You got benefits, you've got a stable job, and you got a salary. Just everything a growing boy needs.
Yeah.
So I jumped in there, spent the next 16 years of my career, or so 15 years of my career, going from State Patrol. I worked at a large corporate billion-dollar company as one of their top SWAT engineers. It's the guy who takes every outage and owns it. And
That
then I
sounds like
moved
fun.
I moved into cloud for a little
Yeah.
while, and then I did infrastructure or critical infrastructure CISO work. So I did a lot of policy generation, a lot of policy, and you know, that was a lot of fun for cybersecurity. But then I eventually just got tired of being in the corporate world, and I thought, you know, I'm working with these corporations, helping them understand how technologies can evolve their business. What if I did that for small businesses? I loved working for small businesses back in the day. So my wife, who's a pharmacist, said, look, I'll supply for the family. You start a company.
It's awesome.
Okay. So in 2017, we started a company where I did fractional CIO work for schools and different businesses. We did really well. And I was using a gap analysis tool called Managed Services Platform to to design that you can use to figure out where the gaps are between your company's current state and their future state. So it's using that to help schools identify their problems, because the MSPs were not having these conversations with the schools.
Yeah, yeah.
And I started being asked to coach MSPs on this stuff, and they started increasing in revenue when they were coaching with me. And we did really well. And then Skip and I, who were coaching at the time, ended up buying Managed Services Platform as a whole during the pandemic, and turned it into this humanized IT process. We took a gap analysis tool and put a nice front end on it, so you know what to talk to clients about, that encouraged conversation, rather than a PowerPoint, which is just a presentation that goes nowhere. Like, you have to the difficulty with a PowerPoint is whether you're talking to a client or you're talking to your staff, it's a one-way conversation. You don't edit PowerPoints. You don't include other people's ideas on PowerPoints. You are simply presenting. So you have to have a dead shot, really great presentation that's going to knock all of their questions out of the park before the conversation starts.
And we know most technical people are really, really good at PowerPoint presentations, right? So
it makes you feel good, at least. But you sitting there, and if you had a tool, what if you had a tool that you could take notes in, that you could move things around as the client is asking questions, like, hey, how do we prioritize this project? What's going on with the budget over here? And let's fix all of this so that we can have a proposed solution for the next year, that a game plan is going to help your business grow.
And this will be like an iterative.
And that's how we got to it. Like, I took all that knowledge from the corporate world of where we were actually talking with the C-levels every day, and I brought it to the MSP world, where they're struggling to get in with the C-levels. Say, look, that's because you need to ask their opinion.
Yeah. And I know that was always something, like when I was at my MSP, process and procedures, but like making it process and repeatable was always a big thing. It very much is so in our industry, but sometimes it loses the human side of it, where it's like you're just running the paces. And I think that's where you fall into like your QBRs that don't generate value, or just here's your asset reports, and here's where you stand, and here's what we can replace. But there's still very reactive with the proactive stuff. So I think, having like these dashboards and things that you can track progress towards an end goal that you've agreed to with these clients, I think, builds that trust and builds the long term. So, you found an empty spot or a weakness in the industry, and you were able to fill it, and that's amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
a lot of it's like showing people, like, they think that they need to talk about warranties and asset management and license management, and those are important tactical items. What your client really wants to know is, hey, how do we improve our profits in Q4? How do we find a better way to sell to our customers? And there are many technical solutions to some of the problems we're having, but we're too busy telling them about licenses and warranties to actually learn that, hey, there's a problem here.
And I think a lot of the difficulty is like when you're boiling it down to like profitability at an MSP. A lot of the stuff that you bring forward in a presentation like that is really going to be opportunity cost and productivity cost that doesn't necessarily boil down to like, I made $1,000 doing this. But it's going to be like, I kept that client for 15 years doing this, or I was able to move them into a much more profitable solution because we had these conversations for 6 months. Or, hey, I'm suddenly having to do compliancy regulations. And like, guess what? We're already 95% of the way there because we've been having conversations together. Also greatly avoids that, you get an email, hey, I bought 6 computers from Best Buy. Can you help me set them up? Like that becomes less likely. So it's really what a virtual CTO in my mind. Like a lot of places, like we're your virtual CTO or whatever the case is, or virtual CISO or whatever nomenclature they want to use. But really, it's just like a fancy QBR. Like this is really your step to that being a part of their businesses, not transactional with them. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff. What's the future hold for you? Do you have like a 1, 3, 5, not even necessarily like from a humanized IT standpoint, just like you, Adam, you got goals, dreams.
What's this part of your plan? Not die? What is that, Billy Madison?
Oh, amazing.
The goal here is to start reaching market saturation. Right now we're still very much in that startup phase where people haven't heard of us. We don't have a massive backer. We're an indie company. and it's very difficult for indie companies to get headway in a marketplace without a massive independent backer behind them. Because when you go to a conference, it's freaking $30,000 just to walk in a door.
Oh yeah, yep.
And that's your base level. Yeah, you don't get to speak, you don't get to teach, you don't get to help. You get to sit at a booth and look shiny.
Yeah.
And so, moving forward, what we've been doing is increasing presence via social media and on our podcasts, and that's been working really well for us. And we want to accelerate the company to the point where we are we're serving MSPs and really helping the main program be that you are talking to your customers, and then you happen to also fix computers. And that's the narrative we want to change. And so, personally, I want to grow the company to the point where it's self-sufficient. It doesn't need to rely on anybody buying it out to sustain. We've seen that too many times in the IT industry where somebody got bought out and the culture got destroyed. I want my culture to be sustainable, and that my customers are still having conversations with their clients that are meaningful and changing, society, because you're helping these small businesses get purchase ground. And after, if I exit, my exit strategy is to move in and create a foundation to help nonprofits stabilize their operating expenses. And that sounds really boring, but imagine helping like a camp. And you look at they have to do they're spending 6 months of the year doing fundraisers. And, I come with my business knowledge and say, hey, look, let's create a strategy where your OpExes are covered every year. And then let's find a way to create a growth strategy for you. These nonprofits are largely led by people with big hearts, and they don't necessarily have a good business mind. But what if they had a foundation helping them establish all of that seed money they need to maintain for decades or centuries in some cases with some of these foundations or some of these nonprofits?
I know there's a lot of MSPs, like even my MSP, like we had a lot of not-for-profit clients, and like a lot of the conversations was just like how to maneuver this grant you just got. Right. It's because it's a lot of times it comes down to like we either get a new roof or we get a new server, and it's like, well, you need both. And I can understand if the roof collapses, you got a problem. I go, but if we don't update this server, like you could also go out of business. They are separate issues. We need to find a way to do this. So, navigating this, especially when a lot of organizations are sometimes just taking donated computers and joining it to the domain and hoping for the best. And regulatory requirements are not letting that fly anymore. And it's a very hard thing to navigate. And, I think the start to it is going back to your base, having good relationships, good conversations with these organizations, knowing their funding cycles, knowing what they're potentially going to be doing with it, and don't just see, hey, they got $1 million. It means I got $1 million in IT spend. No, you might have $50, right? Like you might have $50 and you got to make it work.
7%,
right?
People. 7%.
Yeah. So it's a lot of change. It's really interesting hearing you talk about kind of how Humanize IT started and everything like that. It's so parallel to like how a lot of MSPs became MSPs of like, hey, you're really, really good at like doing business vision or whatever the case is. Can you also look after my IT infrastructure? Like that's how my MSP got started like 23 years ago, was like they were just consulting, and then, hey, while you're here, can you check my PC? You're good with computers. So it's funny like watching your organization kind of blossom and bloom in very much the same thing as like we're having these conversations, and then at the same time it's turning into other stuff. So that's amazing. Excellent. That's been incredibly insightful. I got to thank Neil from Cynics out in Quebec. He was the one that referred you to me. So,
thanks, Neil.
Yeah. The only way I got to meet you, and I'm super glad I did. Thank you so much for coming on. And for anyone that's tuning in, check out the Humanize IT podcast. Is there anything like you want to promote particularly, or the podcast is your main avenue?
Oh, no. We've got the podcast, but we've also got our tool, the Humanize IT tool, which is built to automate your QBRs. We're just coming out with a new feature in early September, which will read your inventory from your PSA and automatically create projects based upon gaps that you define.
Amazing. Excellent. So this will be coming out early September, so it may be live by then. I'll tag everyone in LinkedIn as well, but thank you so much for coming, and looking forward to see what you get up to.
Thank you, sir.
All right.